Well, hello guys, and welcome to another Aethercon podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gibbons, and with me today is Jeff Menges, who's a long-term illustrator in the gaming community. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, hey, John. Good to be here.
Thank you. So basically, guys, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at Jeff's current projects. He had a very successful Kickstarter that ended not too long ago for an illustration book based around Magic the Gathering. We're going to talk to Jeff around that, and then we'll be talking about any kind of future projects Jeff's got online. I know he's a big fan of the golden age of illustration, and he does want to talk to us about past projects and upcoming projects that he has in line with that. So Jeff, first things first, suppose we could let the folks who are listening know a little bit about yourself, experience in the gaming field, where you started, and what you're up to at the moment in time. That would be great.
Okay. Well, I started like so many of the people who attend the conventions that we were discussing previously.
Yeah.
I have had this at my own heart for since I was a teenager and got involved in Dungeons and Dragons and like products as early as the late 1970s. And when I was committing myself to working in a fantasy illustration field, gaming was a struggling smaller industry that used a lot of base art. I mean, there was a ton of companies out there that were putting out material that just wasn't up to, it couldn't touch the standards that we have in gaming today, that's for sure. And it was an easy entry point for somebody that was looking to break into the illustration field. My passion and my goal was to get into book cover work, which has totally changed since I entered the field. But gaming was a place where I could get work doing illustration right from the get-go. And I got gaming assignments while I was in school in the 80s. And it became a huge part of my career for the next 20 years, and it still remains a big part of my output today.
So are you is illustration your full-time job now? You haven't got a day job? Is this what you do full-time?
No, it is not my full-time job.
Okay.
It's a huge part of who I am, and almost every aspect of what I do does concern putting images onto books. But it's not purely about creating my own illustration anymore. Freelancing is such a difficult pace to maintain. It's such a up and down kind of field. It changes all the time. What's good one year might not be good the next year. And the bank tends not to like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and styles change as well, and the genres of the games change, and things become more fashionable. And
all very.
What
true.
about? Yeah, are you still a traditional artist, or have you moved over to digital?
Well, in bringing those last two questions together, I'm a cover designer for a book publisher full time.
Yeah.
So when I'm out the door in the morning, I'm spending all day in Photoshop and InDesign doing digital work, and I do create digital illustrations to some extent for that kind of work. But when I come home and I'm doing stuff for myself, or when I'm commissioned to do work, I prefer to work traditionally. And it might be because I'm on the computer all the time as it is, but there's a satisfaction that I get out of working with a pencil or on a surface or on my board here that I don't get that same satisfaction working for hours on a digital screen. So for me, it's traditional.
Okay. And have you? I'm thinking about, say, publishers, who've used your talents over the years. Has that become difficult for you to get work because you are traditional, or do the publishers don't mind? When you go out there to, say, you see an advert for a job, for a book cover, and you go out and you do your pitch to the art director. Does it matter that it's so traditional? Does it? Because I know nowadays, art directors tend to want certain size formats, and they want it usually sent digitally, and they want it at certain dots per inch, etc., etc. So how have you managed to sort of cope with that?
all of that is still attainable, and it's still very doable from my end. I don't think that those kind of parameters slow me down at all, because from the very beginning, maybe 20 years ago, I always billed myself as a traditional artist with digital delivery. So I can maintain any of what you just described, and any of those problems I can get around. I have a large flatbed scanner that I use for all of my work, and not all of my assignments are delivered that way. I mean, I go in at the end of a drawing and I can boost the contrast a tiny bit, I can brighten the whites a tiny bit, and then I can send that art director his file overnight without a blink of an eye, just like somebody who spent the whole thing working on in Photoshop or Painter. So that's not an issue. It's really just a matter of how I want to create the image.
Yeah, I know. I do know a lot of old school traditional artists. They did struggle with the transition to the digital age almost, and I know a couple myself who even now, you know, after they finish their acrylic or their oil painting, you know, they do find it difficult to scan in. Like you say, you need quite a large flatbed scanner. Yeah. You know, and if they're not that familiar with Photoshop, where they can, you know, tighten it up or alter the color settings, you know, they do have problems. But it's good to hear that, you know, you've managed to sort of, you know, to get past all that, and you're happy to work traditionally. You know, art directors are still out there looking for traditional artists, which is a good move. You know,
well, it does give you a little different look.
Yeah,
and I think it can. There's a little more personality comes through in traditional work than does in digital work, at least right now. It takes an excellent digital artist to really put a unique signature on an image in digital work. I think it's just more natural that it happens traditionally. But I think that the only place that it might snag me, and this, to get back to your point about is it a problem to work traditionally, there's a speed issue that happens in the difference between traditional work and digital work, and a correction issue that happens between the two that art directors have become very comfortable with. So if they hand in a piece and they ask it to be, you know what, it's not the right temperature, we're hoping it was going to be redder and not so brown, or something like that. In a digital file, that's an easy thing to correct. In a traditional one, it's not. So at that point, I might have to jump tracks. If they need a correction, or they want a figure moved a little to the left to make room for more typography. In a digital piece, that's not a nightmare. In a traditional one, it is.
Yeah, I think you know, I mean, I've got a lot of respect for traditional artists who can keep up with that, because, like you say, I mean, a traditional artist, you know, they don't work on multi-levels like, you know, your Photoshoppers, etc. You know, you know, I mean, I started.
You don't have an undo button either.
No, absolutely. You've got to paint over. I mean, you know, I started off as a traditional artist, but I quickly moved over to digital, and now, to tell the truth, Jeff, I work 100% digitally, and I must admit, sometimes, you know, I've even gone to the stage now where I no longer sketch. I used to sketch on paper, scan in, and then do all the work on top. Now I just do everything on, you know, on my Cintiq. So, but like you say, if I send my work off to an art director, and the art director says, John, that's great, but the guy on the right, can you make him a little bit smaller, or make his wings a bit different, etc. For me, if I've been sensible and I've kept that guy in a different layer, I can just go, right, you know. Click of a button and there we go. But for you, you've got to really do a complete paint over, which is, you know,
if it's gotten to that stage, if it's gone that far and they haven't corrected it sooner, it becomes more, and like I just described, at that point I would say, well, yeah, I'll fix that digitally. If it's, you know, because I'll go in and I'll pick that figure up and I'll create the background around him and then make those changes. So even if he wasn't a layer originally, I know enough from that's the kind of work I do in my day job all the time.
Yeah.
And I can finagle those kind of things if I have to.
Okay. Have you, in your experience of when you started traditionally now, and now you can see that art directors are moving to digital a bit more, have you noticed any difference in the rates that you get paid for your artwork? I mean, have you noticed since the digital age that, you know, people are not willing to pay as much money as they used to? I mean, is that something you've noticed at all?
Um, I haven't had a lot of experience there with that kind of a difference, or if there has been a slide in rates from what we were getting 10, 15 years ago to what we're getting today. I don't know if you could point to any one factor and say it may be due to the digital transition. It may be due to the fact that there are a lot more artists out there who are technically savvy now, but that might not have the creative juice that a group had 20, 30 years ago. There's a lot more people that know how to use the tools, but don't necessarily have all that training. You need somebody with a little of both.
Yeah, I know. I think it seems a lot easier. There's a lot more. I've noticed since the digital age, as we call it, as we turned over to the artwork style. There's so much inspiration out there now, isn't there? I mean, it's
overwhelming.
It's amazing. I mean, you can't see now, but to my right here, I've got, probably the same as you, hundreds of art books that I've collected over the years, and 10, 15 years ago, that was where you got your inspiration from, or where you saw what artists were doing. Now, every time you turn your computer on, you see these glorious artworks popping up in front of you, and especially from the Far East and Malaysia and places like that, where they've got a gift for it, and it is quite astounding the amount of talent out there. But I also do think, like I say, it's easy for people to pick up on, and I do think sometimes people lose that creative streak a little bit when they're doing it digitally. You don't need. This is my opinion only. You don't need that same very focused creative edge that you do when you're working traditionally. When that's in front of you, you've got that canvas in front of you, and off you go.
Well, that's an interesting observation. I have to wonder how much of that may be because of the change in commitment that you have on a piece of art. So your planning might not necessarily have to be so thorough and so concrete, because there's an awareness that you can make changes along the way, and that definitely has altered the way that you start a piece and go into it, because that the whole thing from the very base of it is much more flexible and able to be molded along the way, where in a traditional piece you've got to be so much more sure of that foundation before you start building on it, because you can't change the foundation.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, when you're working traditionally, you've got the cost of paints, and let's face it, nowadays, that's not cheap. You start your sketch and you're on the board, you're doing your underpainting, etc. And by the time you spent a few hours in traditional painting, you've committed yourself to it. While in digitally, you can turn around and go, "I'm having a nightmare. This is not working out." Click. And you start again, and there's been
your boss's time and nothing else.
Of course it is. That's it. It's just that it's a time vampire rather than rather than being a financial vampire. So for anyone who's not familiar, say, with your body of work, Jeff, what products that people over the years, going back some time, for example, when you first started, what products will people be familiar with that that you did some good groundbreaking work in?
Well, on entering the field, I did do a lot of work in role playing. I started working in gaming in '87. Was when I got straight out of art school. A few months later, I was at my first Gen Con in Milwaukee, and I went to a seminar on how to get your work into Dragon magazine. And by the time that seminar was over, I had a 2-page spread in the upcoming November issue. So it was a real nice running start, and I started getting work in role playing right after that. My work appeared a lot in there was a small company out of Minnesota called Lion Rampant that went on to do products including Ars Magica, which is still a line which is around today. And I've worked with Ars Magica and their product line continually from that point. I'm still working with them today because their subject focus is very parallel to mine. If you don't know the name, if you're not familiar with that line, it's based in real Europe and uses real history and real figures except that magic and fairy tale creatures, for lack of a better term, do exist, so that you are going to wind up dealing with fairies, you are going to wind up dealing with dragons, and but it has a very deep historical factor, and that appeals to me greatly. So I can rely a lot on all that stuff on the shelves, and really get into painting serious armor and real architecture without going
stuff that you could wear realistically in real life,
right.
rather than
That's important. If you can't wear it realistically, shouldn't be part of that system.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, whenever I turn to a fantasy piece, you know, I take a lot of inspiration from real work armors, and luckily for me, you know, where I live in Manchester in England, there's a city called York, which is not too far away, and they have an arms and military museum, which is just wall to wall archaic and medieval weapons and armor, and you know, I take my camera all day, and I'm just like this, you know, for inspiration pieces, you know. So okay, that's good. That's fantastic. So let's talk about that. Let's move on to this gathering, this magic book.
Okay.
You know, I mean,
where people know me from, I mean, if once I got past some of that role-playing material, this idea came along for the crazy card game in 1992, and it was a couple of years later at another Gen Con, and I had already been working with Wizards of the Coast on role-playing products. A lot of people don't realize or recall that they were putting out a lot of role-playing product before they put out card games. And a number of us who were involved from the very beginning were working with them on those products and already had working relationships with them. That's why they came to us first.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what role-playing games did Wizard do before you know?
Well, before they accomplished some of their own material, they were producing what they like a catalyst type product, something that would be an accessory to go with any game system that was out there. Like I know that they had one on like a deities kind of a book, so that you could take a different set of religious affiliations and apply the stuff that they had in their book to whatever game system you were playing. And they even had like conversion charts in the back for if you played with this system or that system. And they did a lot of stuff like that. Well, not a lot, but that was kind of what got the ball rolling for them.
Right. Okay.
And Richard was working with them, and he had his first idea that he presented to them was for Robo Rally. But the expense of doing a board game was just way too much for a small company, but they were interested in the way Richard thought, and he had some really fantastic concepts. So they asked him if he had a simpler idea, and that's when he brought them the idea behind Magic.
He's never looked back. So I'm looking now at your Kickstarter page, which I know is over, and it was very, very successful. I mean, looking at it, I think originally you wanted to raise $32,000, and you went close to $150,000.
That's right.
You know, which is absolutely amazing. You know, it's obviously credit to the book itself and the word that was put into it. You know, and the advertising campaign that's needed. You know, on Kickstarter to raise an amount.
Well, that was a real team effort, the advertising part, and it really needs to be said that although the impetus to do the book, it has been, you know, 95% me. I'm the book guy. It's what I bring to the table. But when this conversation started, the idea to do the Gathering project, I kind of fished around and tried to round up the troops more or less, and everybody who was involved in the first 2 years of the game was extended an invitation to be a part of it. And that wound up being 49 different artists. I thought that was a good base number to start working with. And I thought if I could get 35, that would be outstanding. And there was a lot of people didn't think I'd get 30, and in the end we wound up with 41 out of the first 49. But
and was it hard to contact some of these people? I mean, I presume some are no longer doing art anymore or whatever.
That's right.
I'm sure.
There's some that are completely removed from the business now. There's some that didn't want any part of it, and they're not involved. And there were just two that we were not able to even reach. or if we were, they didn't respond. But once things got rolling, I made it pretty clear that the project had gotten huge, and there was no way I could, like you say, the ad campaign was really important and very integral in getting us the funding that we got. And that I handed over. I looked for a volunteer I said, look, I need somebody to take care of Facebook. I need somebody to take care of the Kickstarter campaign. And I said, I can do the book. The book is my field, but I can't do that and do all of these other things. And Pete Venners stepped up and said, I can take care of the Kickstarter. And when I said, okay, we need to find somebody that will field Facebook for us then, and he said, you know what, so many of those questions are going to be paralleled from one unit to the next. He said it really doesn't make sense for somebody else to do that. So he took on both of those responsibilities, and he's done a fantastic job with it.
Fantastic. So who's Full Steam Press then? Because that's the publisher of the book. Is that yours, Full Steam Press?
Full Steam Press is me. It's the idea of creating books like this one has been something that's been rolling in the back of my head for quite a while, and this just seemed like an opportunity to jump on it. It was like this was the time to grab the bull by the horns. It's not necessarily the book I would have wanted to start with, but it was definitely the right opportunity. So I founded and licensed this company name and basically got a company rolling for the purpose of doing this book. But Full Steam Press is me, and this project is kind of an isolated outbreak of that whole project. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, look at the Kickstarter. I mean, obviously it's over now. I mean, it ended in March. I mean, after what the Kickstarter's finished, and obviously you got a lot more than what you expected. You know, the pledge, the pledge was fantastic. Once the Kickstarter ended, how did you get on then? Because I know that it can be an unpleasant side of Kickstarter where these things fund fantastically, they go above and beyond, and it's not until the Kickstarter's over and the guys behind it realize then when they start looking at the nitty-gritty and the production costs of the books and the shipping costs, etc., etc. I mean, have you found any difficulties with that, or has it all gone smooth?
Well, the costs haven't been a tremendous issue, and even if we'd gotten a third of the goal of the amount of money that we'd gotten at the end, we probably would have been fine getting those things done, because the financial goal of 32 and change was set with the idea of what we needed to actually get the job done on a smaller scale. And if we'd gotten 35,000 and that's where it stopped, we still could have done it. There wouldn't have been any return for the artists, and that was a chance we all took in the beginning. But because of my publishing background, I did understand what the potential costs were going to be. I had quotes from printers already in place before we did the job. That's where that number came from. The biggest underestimate that I am facing as a result of the Kickstarter is in the distribution and fulfillment of the whole monster. When you've got as positive response as we did, and this small landslide of work's going to come in, and in a short amount of time, I'm going to be looking at getting a couple of pallets of books here that have to be respun and gotten out to the people that supported it. That is going to be the tricky part, or at least what I think is going to be most challenging. But I've gotten help from the printer on that too, and that's been huge. The printer will do a good amount of our fulfillment directly for us, and we have the funding to make that happen, and we don't want to hold up the distribution of the product any more than we absolutely have to. So when I get a product to me and I get an approval of, like, okay, this is looking good, send X amount here to me, and you can distribute directly to a good number of the people who backed up the project. We'll get it straight from the printer.
Okay, so you didn't go down the print-on-demand route then?
No, I didn't. I wanted to avoid a digital product. I haven't seen digital printing that completely surpasses anything that I've seen in traditional printing. I wanted this to be a traditionally web printed product. I want a quality product. That's huge to me. I see a lot of publishing trickling down into lesser and lesser quality because the numbers are getting smaller and smaller for physical books. But if I'm going to put a book out, I want it to be a book that's going to last, and I want it to be a book that's going to be printed right. It's not that digital won't get there. It's kind of like cameras, I think. I think that eventually it'll be there, but I don't think it's there quite yet. Okay. So, no, we approach a traditional printer, and that's where we're headed with it.
So what can you tell me about the book itself? I mean, what about the content, the size of it, the images? Because obviously I know the Kickstarter's over, but I'm presuming that this book is going to be out there to be able to be bought. So, so for example, someone like me who wasn't involved, didn't know about it, unfortunately. Obviously, I missed that, otherwise I would have pledged myself. If I wanted to get my hands on the book, I'm presuming I can do that now, even though the Kickstarter's finished?
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to be printing about twice as much as what has been called for. We do have a limited number. I have an arrangement that I've worked out with Wizards of the Coast because we're using their product name so heavily, because we're using their logos. They've been incredibly cooperative and just, they love the idea of the project, actually. But there's a limited amount of time. I have a window that I can print books, and I have a number that I can print up to. And once I've reached that number or the time is expired, then the run is done. And whatever we get out before then, that'll be it.
So how are you advertising that now then? Because obviously the Kickstarter's done. Let's say, I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I'm presuming you've got enough books now for everyone who pledge level in the Kickstarter.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let's just pull a number out and say you've got, let's say you've got 1,000 more copies sat there now that,
Sure.
beyond the Kickstarter. How are you going to advertise that? How are you going to get people attracted to know it's there to buy?
If you're aware of the Kickstarter page, just a skim over that will kind of direct you to the idea that there are still books available. You might have to skim down a little, but there is some notation there about it. And that if you send an email to fullsteaminquiry@gmail.com, that's going to come directly to me, and I take a look at those maybe every second or third night and respond to everybody that's posted there with an inquiry. I send them the information that's necessary. Right now it's only set up as a PayPal payment, but what that does, and anybody who wants to inquire at this point right now or until the book is out, and probably even afterwards, those PayPal payments just add you to the bottom of the same list that the Kickstarter people are on. And if your name gets to me before we get fulfillment from the printer, your name will go on that same list to the printer, and your order will be fulfilled the same way. Okay. And then once the books get to me, when those orders come in, they'll just be first come, first serve on that basis. And I'll try and put the brakes on it before it gets dangerous at the end of the run, and say that, we're coming to the end, this is it, last call. But we've gotten plenty of extras coming that right now we can handle everything we've got with room.
Okay, well, for everyone listening to the podcast, Jeff has a dedicated Facebook page to the Gathering Kickstarter. Head over there and like the page. It's the usual, www.facebook.com/The Gathering Art Book, no gaps in between. Like that page, and I'm presuming that may be the details for how to contact you, or can people do that through Facebook, Jeff?
I missed some of that. There was a technical glitch. You froze up for a minute.
Sorry, I'm just saying. So if you've got the dedicated Facebook page to the Gathering book now, which I've just given the address out to, if somebody, say for example, does not know the Kickstarter itself and notices the book through Facebook, is there a way that they can contact you via the Facebook page if they were interested in getting a copy or getting their hands on the book?
There's a Facebook page for the Gathering. There's a Facebook page for Full Steam Press, which is me. There's the Kickstarter page, and there's the email address that I gave out. And all of that definitely trickles through me. I mean, I might not hit all of it as frequently. The emails I try and hit constantly, but the other pages I surf all the time, and when questions are hanging out there, I try and get to them. Pete answers a lot of the mail that comes in through the Facebook page, and if he runs into something he can't deal with or isn't the right thing for him to answer, he'll point it out to my attention. And between the two of us, I think we've done a pretty decent job handling all those inquiries. And right now we're just looking forward to having a physical product that we can get out there real soon.
Absolutely. So everyone listening, head over to one of these addresses. Get your hands on this book. You know, it sounds like maybe there's not going to be much left in 12 months. 12 months down the line, you might not be able to get your hands on this book anymore, I presume, Jeff.
Well, I think that once it gets out at all, I think then they're going to go pretty fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's ever going to wind up being in a store. It just doesn't seem like it's. I'm not set up to be that kind of distributor yet. You know, maybe down the road that kind of thing could happen, but I think that there are so many inroads being made online, and there's so much communication, like what we're doing right here, that I think this is probably going to be all the advertising that this product needs, and it's going to reach the people that really want it.
Well, good stuff. Okay, well, that's the Gathering book. Let's quickly move on to another love of yours, Jeff, which is the golden age of illustrations. Obviously, you know, you're a traditional artist yourself. You're obviously a big fan of you know, the golden age and traditional artists going back many, many years. You know, you sent me some links prior to our conversation today, Amazon links, and I can see that, you know, you already have a good few books out there on the golden age. I'll just if people want to find you, it's literally a case of get onto Amazon, search under your name, Jeff A. Dot. Is that correct? Jeff A. Menges.
Yep.
And we can see that we have lots of books by on Arthur Rackham, you know, a fantastic artist. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your love of the golden age of illustration. What made you produce these books, and again, what was the work involved in getting these books and getting the rights to produce artwork in book form by these guys and girls who are obviously no longer with us, most of them. You know what I mean? You know, what was the process of that?
Well, it has a lot to do with my full-time environment. The outfit that I do cover design for is Dover Publications in Long Island, New York, and they are what is termed a reprint publisher, meaning that they take a lot of work that's fallen into the public domain. They take a lot of books that have been let go out of print by other printers, and if they find some merit in them, even if it's small, they'll bring them back and add them to their list. So after working with Dover for a number of years, I realized that they had kind of just touched on the subject of Golden Age illustration, but I really felt, I knew from my own interest that there was a lot of material there that they hadn't even looked at. One of the most successful books they had in their list 10 years ago was this book they had done on Arthur Rackham, which was about 60 plate on Wagner's operas that Rackham did, and it was horribly reproduced. Actually, it was done by photographic means, and the photos weren't well balanced. But it was a very big seller for Dover, and I said, "There's a lot more of his material that is in the public domain. Not all of it was at the time, but now it is all in the public domain." And but there was a lot out there that I felt could get enough interest to make publishing these books worthwhile.
Okay.
So I presented them with an idea of doing a book on Rackham's earlier illustrations, and they were a little hesitant at first. They wanted an additional marketplace, so we focused it only on his fairy tale illustrations, because that would get not only people who were interested in Rackham as an illustrator, but also people who were interested in fairy tale specifically. Okay. So with that two-pronged approach, they went in and we did a book on Arthur Rackham's fairy tale illustration. It was a huge seller for our fine art line, And from that point, it was, okay, what else do you got? So we started to look at all kinds of people from that turn of the century period, roughly 100 years ago, whose work had become public domain material that Dover could go into and spend an amount of money buying early original editions and reprinting directly from those early prints. And I became the compilationist. I became the guy who found out which volumes it was we needed to chase down, picked out the plates that got put together, researched a small amount of biographical work on these guys, and put it all together into a book form. And that's something I've done regularly for them over the last 10 years.
And I must admit, that sounds interesting. I mean, it's almost kind of like a little bit of research and detective work, isn't it? To track
Absolutely.
Down, I can imagine to sort of track down these pictures, find out where they are, find out if someone's already got copyrights. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, is that, I presume that's what you have to do, and make sure that. I mean, because Arthur Rackham, I mean, people are not familiar with his work. If I remember correctly, it was very, very much pencil-based drawings, wasn't it? Wind in the Willows is what I remember. I mean, I'm obviously from the UK, and the Wind in the Willows are quite popular, and I do remember early Wind in the Willows illustrations being by Arthur.
1939, Wind in the Willows, published posthumously, right after he passed away.
Really? Oh, really? Okay. So, I mean, that must be quite exciting, actually, having to go out there and track down. I mean, obviously you must have been a big fan of the guy anyway, before you started to sort of look at producing a book around his artwork. But during the process, did you discover artworks that you were not aware of or that people had not seen before?
Absolutely. And those are what makes this hunt so exciting.
Yeah.
I got, and I still do. There's, I'm constantly acquiring things like these. This is a 6 months of Scribner's magazine from 1921. And these are things that I get online periodically. And every once in a while, I'll pull one of those up that has magazine illustrations by somebody like Arthur Rackham or Edmund Dulac or Willie Pagani. All those, because they did a lot of book work, and that's kind of easy research to do, but they also did tons of magazine work that's much harder to track down. And the book work may have been reprinted, and it may have gone into for other editions over the years, but the magazine work is usually printed once, and that's it. So the more magazine work I can find, the more unique and special these reprints that we do today are.
I mean, Arthur Rackham, I mean, he was quite ahead of his time, really, wasn't he? I mean, I've noticed now there's another of the books that you produced is Rackham's Fairies, Elves, and Goblins.
Yep.
And I mean, when you look at some of the images from that, and when you think, they're nearly, well, some of them are over 100 years old.
Yeah.
But that could be, a lot of those could be illustrations by Alan Lee, for example, who I think took a lot of inspiration from Rackham. I mean, I love Alan Lee's work, but you can definitely see, how close they are in these beautiful fine lines, sketchy lines, and lots of gossamer clothing flying everywhere. I mean, they are a beautiful piece of work.
He blazed the trail that a lot of us still look to follow today. Absolutely. Yeah. And he was a star in his day. Arthur Rackham
was he really?
A star. Absolutely. He was really well paid and highly sought after.
Right, okay, which makes a change, doesn't it, for most illustrators who are all living on the edge of poverty. So this golden age then, is that a term that, say, you've come up with, or is that known throughout the world, the golden age of illustration?
No, it's pretty well used amongst historians to represent a period when the industrial age got to a point where printing was happening and getting a lot of material out there, and when books suddenly began to appear for availability to the general public where they hadn't before. So I think, depending on who you ask, the dates kind of fluctuate a bit, but I pretty much put it between 1890 and 1925. A lot of people feel it might have ended at the end of World War I, because what happened in World War I is a lot of the expense of producing books got removed, especially from European printers, because they had to spend that money elsewhere. So the quality of a high-end book, like the ones that Arthur Rackham used to be involved with, settled down immediately. And people's desire to spend money on something as frivolous as a nice book, they became, after World War I, they became much more concerned with the reality of things. And putting money into artwork was not a high priority.
Yeah, and I suppose then once you start getting beyond that, the 1930s, 1940s, when print production became more easier and cheaper, new technologies, and then you almost have like a new age of illustrators. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, I love, for example, Norman Rockwell, which is, I mean, that's kind of like the 40s and 50s, isn't it? If I believe, is that sort of era?
He was working as early as the teens.
Was he really?
He was, but yeah. he definitely hit his stride in the 40s during World War II. Absolutely. But you see, he's not generally remembered as a book artist. He's a magazine artist.
He was also pin-up artist as well, wasn't he?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I wouldn't put him in that category, but definitely working at that time when that was a real big movement. Yeah. But as far as Golden Age work is concerned, I think that after the 20s, magazines became much more popular as opposed to books. People were looking for something that was less expensive. And then you started to get radio trickling in as being a form of entertainment. One of the reasons why the Golden Age was such a boom is because if you wanted to be entertained at home, books were the best thing. There was no radio. There was, unless you were playing music on your own, there was no television. Books were the only place where you were getting outside influence and creative people that you could bring home and enjoy in the privacy of your own home. So that was why books really boomed at that time. And magazines came in shortly thereafter because the print production became so much better and able to turn around a product that much faster on a weekly basis. And then you got into television and radio, and people's interest in books and publishing in general began to wane. So it's never going to be as strong as it was back in the teens and 20s.
So what are your thoughts on, I mean, I know when we talked about the illustration side of things early on in the interview, and we discussed the move to digital. I mean, do you think the art of illustration and the old routine of buying a book, for the physical book in your hands, a beautiful piece of illustration, do you think that's something that's going to die now because of PDF and because of the digital age? I mean, I even though I'm a digital artist, for example, I do not like PDFs. I mean, I love a book, but obviously not everyone's like that, and people love these PDFs and to be able to view them all their devices. I mean, do you think that's going to change the way illustration is and the way books are produced?
Yeah, it already has. It already has changed the way all that's produced. And I think that you and I are of this kind of middle generation that has a fond memory and likes to handle a book, and we grew up where absorbing information through a page-based routine is very second nature to us. But the generation that's growing up right now is used to absorbing all of its information from a screen, and they don't have that same affection that you and I have for getting things from a page.
Yeah, and I suppose also as well, it's that quick grab, isn't it, of information. I mean, if you've got, PDFs are so cheap, and unfortunately due to things like piracy, you can get your hands on these things. Yeah. And I mean, for example, on my computer, I have an inspiration folder, which I'm sure most artists do, where you'll see an image on the screen and go, I like that. I'm going to add that to my inspirations. You do, and sometimes I look back and I must have like 2,000-3,000 images,
Yeah.
And I think, well, but then again, the last time I probably looked at it or looked at those images, you see an image on the screen, you like it, you put it in your inspiration, and it's almost like instantaneously forgotten about. It's in the big ether of the digital age. Well, if you've got a book, it's there, and you'll savor it, and you'll open it, and you'll have it there, and you can take it with you, and it's maybe we're just getting old-fashioned, Jeff. Maybe we're dinosaurs, and
well, it's definitely different.
Breed.
It is something that's changing in the way we, as a culture, absorb information. And I do think that there will be room in the future that a quality book will still be a treasured item. And this is where I think there's a difference. I think that when you're buying something like, let's go back to Rackham. If you want Grimm's Fairy Tales and you want to read it to your kids, to have that on a really nice book where they can look over your shoulder and see those pictures as you're flipping through it is a shared experience. You're not going to get huddled around the Nook.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work the same way. But there will be things like when you're buying a textbook for a course, I don't think that the need to have the physical book is going to be quite the same as just the need for having the information. I think what you need out of a product is the information, then getting it online or digitally is going to be fine. If what you want is to savor an experience and be able to soak it in, then I think that a book is still going to have a special place for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, everyone loves a coffee table book, don't they? Everyone loves a big, beautiful-looking book that sits there, and people come into the house, and you go, "Oh, have you seen my latest illustration book?"
I know you and I feel that way. I do wonder if the generation to follow is going to feel the same. But
well, I suppose it's up to us old schoolers to educate them. I think that's what we need to do, Jeff. I think that's the way. Well, okay, let's move on it. well, okay. Let's talk about future projects. I mean, obviously we've got the Gathering, which is something you currently worked on. You've got this library which people can find on Amazon if they search under your name of illustrators and the golden age of illustration. What are you working on currently, or future plans, other books or other projects that you can tell us about briefly?
Well, the Gathering book is almost in the pipe. I mean, it's really close to being press ready. The book that last came out was a book on William Heath Robinson's work.
Okay.
Now, a lot of his, he's somebody that you're probably familiar with. His later work, he had kind of two careers. He did more traditional book illustration at the beginning of his life, and later on became an astounding cartoonist and humorist. And that work is still in copyright protection, and it's not the work I was interested in any case. But his illustration work largely gets glossed over because of the success of the humorous part of his career. So I put together a collection on his early illustration work that doesn't normally get the same sort of visual attention that his later work gets, because I think it was worthwhile, and I think he had a remarkable skill for it, even though what happened was that the marketplace split, and like I was saying, that book production started to wane in the 20s. So you could either stick to that and become part of a field that was declining in size, or you could kind of change what you did. And Robinson found success in this other field and went off in a different direction. There were a number of artists who made those changes, and there were artists who didn't and suffered for it.
Now, Art Nouveau, he tends to be. Was he from like the 20s? Was that like the sort of height of his career, like the 1920s, 30s, or was he before that?
Well, his earliest work is probably from just after the turn of the century.
Right.
But the humorous work he did was in the 30s and 40s and around World War II. So depending on anybody's individual familiarity with him, they might look at something totally different. He did a great Midsummer Night's Dream in the teens that might be what somebody remembers him for, when somebody right next to them might remember him for the complicated devices and humorous cartoons that he did in World War II.
But his style is very, very similar to it was kind of like, again, it was more this very sort of beautiful line pencil work. This is the stuff I've seen of him. I'm sure I might have seen some illustrations where he depicted sort of the Celtic pantheon or something like that. I'm sure there's some book I've seen of his where basically he illustrated kind of like legends and myths from the sort of ancient Celt and the Irish or Welsh histories of things. I'm sure I must have seen some of his artwork like that. It's again, it's very similar to Rackham, I think, where he's got this beautiful kind of like pencil line work, lovely sketches.
He does do some incredible line work. He definitely does some incredible line work, and I'm drawn to those artists for sure. And that's, you know, when it comes time for, if Dover's looking for me to do something new that way, then the first guys that I'm going to look for are the ones that I'm most interested in. I have at times put projects together for them that haven't been personally driven, but you know, if they're asking me, then they're going to be the ones that are piquing my interest, and Robinson was definitely in that group. And then, so the next project I have going after The Gathering is going to be a book that compiles a large profile of illustrators who were professional at that time, that 1890 to 1925 window. And I've been putting books like the ones we've been discussing together for about 10 years, and the most difficult part of it for me is that there's a marketplace for the top 5 or 10% of the artists who were successful at that time. You know, we can collect a large enough amount of their work. There's enough recognition of what they've done in the past that makes it worthwhile to spend the money to get a print run done and do a book. But there are tons, and I mean tons, of great period illustrators who were professionals their entire lives, but whose work is never going to amount to any kind of recognition that's going to be worth compiling in a book on them specifically. So I wanted to create a kind of a reference book to be able to sample a lot of their work and bring their work to the attention of people like yourself and contemporaries of us that want to find more of this kind of material but don't know where to dig for it. So I'm trying to do that digging and bring it to the surface and then let everybody share in it.
Good stuff. So what about, we're looking, that's obviously old school illustration and golden age. I mean, have you got any more plans to sort of stay within the RPG industry? And, you know, is I noticed you've got a Facebook page, Scarecrow Graphics, I believe, isn't it? Scarecrow Graphics, and, you know, you're going to Con? Is that where you're off to?
Yeah, next week.
Okay, yeah. I mean, what you know, how do you find the conventions? I presume you've got an art booth there, an art table. I
do.
What's your experience of conventions as an artist?
Well, it's something I put on anybody who's trying to get into this market as being the most important part of being a professional in this field. Is what a convention can do for your career. No, you know, it's certainly different now than it was when I got started, because the internet wasn't even a factor when I was beginning. I was still writing letters. But being at a convention is an opportunity to present yourself physically to a company that you want to be a part of. It's a chance to impress upon a company, impress upon an art director that you are somebody that they want to work with, and that's an opportunity that they're not going to come to you looking for it. But if you're at a convention and you want to work for company X and they've got representatives there, then that's your opportunity to make that positive impression and to become part of the bigger picture and what they're doing. It's certainly had a huge sway on my career, and I mean, early conventions that I attended were really about who's going to be there and what companies are putting out product that I think I can deservedly be a part of, and then putting myself in a place to be heard so that I would have that opportunity.
Okay.
LuxCon's kind of different. It's a show that's driven by artists and for artists. It's really a celebration of the kind of work that you and I do. It's a boot camp. It's very different. It's not about chasing those companies down. Yeah. It's about talking to each other and sharing ideas and
having a good time.
Well, no, there's some of that too, but that's not. The focus is very art driven. It's really unlike anything else that I've done. and you feel great when it's over. You want to run home, and you just can't wait to work after that show. It's great.
And I know we did talk briefly off camera before we went live on the podcast, and I was saying how jealous I am being UK based because we just don't have the convention scene over here. You know, it's very difficult for European artists. I mean, you know, you might get to one European convention a year, and it's just, you know, while over in the stateside, it seems that every 2 months is some kind of convention, and you know, all the guys who I follow, friends of on Facebook and stuff, they're all off there meeting each other and networking, and you know, it does get frustrating really for me, and I'm sure other European artists when, you know, trying to get into the business and trying to get the foot in the door with companies. Because you can't be on the scene. It's funny because I mean, it's interesting, and I don't really want to go too much into this. I mean, I'm thinking maybe another podcast in the future where, you know, where if you want to come on it, where we can maybe, you know, get some other artists on the podcast to discuss, you know, conventions and portfolios and how to approach art directors and what makes a good portfolio and what to do at a convention. I think would be very useful.
I'd be happy to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something which, you know, not many people have the full knowledge on and how to impress an art director and how to go about doing it, and you know, the etiquette of it, and you know, taking the knocks.
It's tricky.
You know, absolutely. You know, it's. I think a freelance art is like any kind of freelance work. You know, it's not a job where you're being paid all the time. So you've got to go out there and you've got to fight for the work, and there are knocks that you get with it, and you just got to stand yourself back up and look at things as constructive criticisms, as they say, and move on. You know. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people tend to just use forums to post their artworks, but forums can be very brutal. You know, I put artwork on there, and all it takes is one bad comment from someone who might know nothing about art, and it can really throw you off for some time. Yeah, you know, absolutely. But I think when you go to a convention, you know, like you're about to do, and you know, and you see other artists, and you mingle and you talk, and you see the way they're doing things, it's a real big boost to people's confidence. Yeah. So okay, I think we're almost due to wrap up now, Jeff. You know, we've obviously talked about the gathering. Is there anything that you'd like to quickly go over, or any links you want to give out to people? I mean, we've already given people the link for the Facebook gathering page. I think you've also given a couple of email addresses out. For everyone interested in Jeff's Facebook page, Scarecrow Graphics.
Can you spell it for him, John?
I will indeed. It's let's have a look here. We've got the usual facebook.com/pages/Jeff -A.Menges MENGES Scarecrow SKAIR Crow CROW -graphics, and that will take you to Jeff's graphic page on Facebook, where he regularly posts his latest artwork. And
yeah, that kind of gets you into my illustration work.
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, that's still a huge part of who I am, and it's just I think that being an illustrator today, you kind of have to be multifaceted.
Okay. And absolutely.
And that, you know, that's a big part of it. The books are a part of it. I teach at a university. That's a part of it. I do design work, you know, and it's all of those things together that make me the creative person that I am.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, funny enough, you do see a lot of people now advertising for illustrators, but I suppose now, because self-publishing and the community and the technology out there to be able to be a small print press is very easy now. So you do tend to find that a lot of people want artists now who've got book layout skills, who've got the knowledge.
It's a whole new market.
Books. Yeah,
it's a whole new marketplace, and I would tread carefully, but there's definitely work out there.
Yeah. I see it advertised quite a lot. In fact, I see a lot more advertising for editors and layout artists now than you do your standard illustrator. Right. Anything else you want to say, Jeff? Any other links you want to put people to at all that we can shout out?
Well, I think we've covered most of the bases. fullsteaminquiry@gmail.com. That's the best place for you to pull my attention to the Gathering project. If you want to see illustration work, at the Scarecrow Facebook page is definitely a good place. My biggest gallery, this is the one I will throw out.
Okay.
The biggest gallery of my illustration is at
Okay, we seem to have lost Jeff for the moment. He's obviously clicked the wrong button. Oh, and he's back.
Here. I'm back.
He's back. He pressed the wrong button.
I did.
Is it Dream Colony by any chance?
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking for.
Okay, I've got it here. It's okay. www.dreamcolony.net/gallery/V/J Menges, JMENGES.
That's the one.
And that will take you to a section of that Dream Colony Graphics, which is dedicated to Jeff's artwork.
Yeah, there's a number of artists who are represented there, but that's probably the best online gallery of my illustration work right now.
Okay, fantastic. I'll surely have a look at that once we finish. Well, Jeff, it's been great talking to you. Again, people, I can't say this enough. You need to go and have a look at the Gathering book. You know, it's a good deal. I've looked at the prices on the Kickstarter. I think that'd be a very interesting, nice coffee table book, as we were talking about previously, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah. Believe me, it's been a real long labor, but boy, the feedback we're getting on what we're about to put out there has been great, and I can't wait to get it in people's hands.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, if you want to, I'll stop the podcast now, Jeff, but if you wanted to hang on for a couple of minutes, we'll have a chat afterwards. In the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Jon Gibbons, and it's also goodbye from Jeff.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Thanks a lot. I'll see you later, guys.